Emma sat in the passenger seat of her son's car, watching the Vermont countryside rush by. The trees looked like fire against the clear sky, their leaves glowing red, orange, and gold. She had always loved autumn, but it had been years since she allowed herself to enjoy it. Life had grown heavy, filled with work, deadlines, bills, and quiet evenings in an empty house. When Daniel suggested a weekend getaway, she hadn't asked questions. He was insistent, and she had trusted him even when he refused to tell her where they were going. The road twisted through small towns and wide fields, and with each mile, Emma's curiosity grew. Daniel seemed almost too calm, his eyes focused on the road, a faint smile pulling at his lips. He wasn't the little boy she remembered sitting in the back seat with crayons and questions. He was a man now, strong, thoughtful, and protective. She felt both pride and sadness. Pride because he had become everything she hoped for. Sadness because time had gone too quickly, leaving her alone in ways she didn't always speak about. "Daniel," she finally said, breaking the silence, "you could at least give me a hint. Am I supposed to be nervous?" Her son glanced at her, his smile widening. "Not nervous, Mom. Just patient. Trust me." Emma shook her head with a small laugh. She had learned over the years that when Daniel used that tone, he was hiding something big. But what could it be? Cabin? A family reunion? He had mentioned nothing about anyone else joining them. It was unusual, and that made her heart stir with questions she couldn't quite form into words. As they drove deeper into the countryside, Emma noticed the air change. The city noise and sharp pace of her daily life felt far behind her now. There was a calmness here, a sense of peace that brushed against her chest like a forgotten memory. She rolled down the window and breathed in deeply, the crisp scent of pine and wood smoke filling her lungs. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the wind brush her hair. When she opened them, Daniel was watching her with a quiet look. "You needed this, didn't you?" he asked softly. She didn't answer right away, but she knew he was right. For too long, her life had been about survival. Pay the bills, keep the house in order, push away the loneliness when it grew too heavy. She had grown used to silence, but silence wasn't the same as peace. And Daniel knew it. "I suppose I did," she said at last, her voice calm but laced with honesty. "It's been a long time since I've felt free." Daniel's grip on the steering wheel tightened for a second, but his smile never faded. "That's exactly why I planned this. You'll see soon enough." Her chest tightened with curiosity. His words were careful, almost too careful, as though he was guarding a secret. She wanted to press further, but something in his expression told her not to. It was the same look he had worn as a boy when he wrapped Christmas gifts and begged her not to peek. He wanted this moment to unfold on his terms. And Emma didn't have the heart to ruin it. The car slowed as they approached a narrow road lined with tall trees. The branches arched overhead, forming a golden tunnel. Sunlight flickered through, dancing across the windshield, and Emma felt a sudden rush of warmth in her chest. The scene was beautiful, but it also felt purposeful, as though every detail of this journey was leading her somewhere important. She studied her son again. He wasn't just happy, he was hopeful. There was something in his eyes, a quiet determination she hadn't seen before. He wasn't simply taking her on a trip. He was guiding her toward something he believed she needed. The thought made her pulse quicken. "Daniel," she tried again, her voice softer this time. "Whatever you're planning, I hope you know I don't need grand gestures. Just being here with you, away from everything, is enough." Her words were true, but Daniel only gave her a knowing smile, the kind that carried both love and mystery. "I know, Mom, but sometimes life gives us more than we expect. You just have to be open to it." His words lingered in her ears as the car turned one final corner. Emma leaned forward, eyes widening as the road opened into a view she hadn't imagined. A glimmer of water stretched ahead, surrounded by hills glowing with color. The lake shone under the afternoon sun, still and endless, as if waiting just for them. And nestled along its edge was something that made her breath catch. It wasn't just a cabin. It was a retreat. Wooden decks stretched across the water, lights strung between tall posts, and smoke curled lazily from chimneys. The place looked like it had been pulled from a dream. The kind of dream she used to have when her life was still filled with plans and laughter. She turned to her son, her voice breaking into a whisper. "Daniel, this is beautiful. You did all this." For a moment, his smile softened into something almost tender. "It's just the beginning, Mom. There's more waiting here than you think." Emma's heart raced as she looked back at the retreat. She didn't understand his words fully, but she felt them deep inside her. Something was waiting, something she hadn't expected. And as the car rolled forward, she realized this trip was going to change more than just her weekend. It might change her life. Emma stepped out of the car, the cool air brushing against her cheeks. The place looked almost unreal. The retreat stood right by the lake, its wooden decks glowing under strands of warm lights. The water was so still. It mirrored the sky, and the hills wrapped around it like a quiet guard. She had never been anywhere like this. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Only breathe in the beauty around her. Daniel grabbed the bags from the trunk with an energy that made her smile. He looked proud, almost too proud, as though he had been waiting for her reaction. "Do you like it?" he asked, his eyes searching hers. "Like it?" Emma shook her head, still in awe. "It feels like a painting." "Daniel, this must have cost." He quickly cut her off, shaking his head. "Don't worry about that. You deserve it." The words stilled her. She wasn't used to hearing that. For years, she had been the one giving, holding, keeping things together. To hear her son say she deserved something made her throat tighten. She touched his arm gently, grateful but still curious. Why this place? Why now? Daniel didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked toward the path leading to the main lodge. His expression carried that same quiet mystery, the one he had been holding since the trip began. "You'll see soon," he said again, his voice softer this time. Emma frowned but followed his lead. The path crunched beneath their shoes, and with each step, her anticipation grew. The retreat wasn't just beautiful, it was personal. She felt it in the way the staff greeted them warmly, in the way Daniel walked as if he had rehearsed this moment. There was intention behind everything. Inside, the lodge glowed with soft light. Wooden beams stretched high above them, and the scent of pine filled the air. Fire crackled in a stone fireplace, and cozy chairs were scattered around like an invitation to stay forever. Emma's chest tightened with nostalgia. She remembered nights long ago when she and her late husband had dreamed of taking trips like this. They had promised each other they would travel once life settled down. But life had never settled, and then he was gone. She brushed the thought away before it pulled her under. This weekend wasn't about grief. Daniel had made that clear. Still, the silence of the lodge pressed against her heart, reminding her of everything she had missed. "Mom," Daniel's voice pulled her back. He was standing by the window, looking out at the lake. His face held that same secret she couldn't reach. "I have someone I want you to meet." But her steps froze. The words hit her like a wave. Someone. She blinked, confused. "Meet." "Daniel, what are you?" Before she could finish, she heard it. A voice. Her name spoken gently, carefully, as though it hadn't been spoken in years. "Emma." She turned, and time seemed to falter. Standing near the doorway was a man she never thought she would see again. Michael. Her breath caught, her fingers tightening around her bag. She hadn't seen him since the funeral, when grief had built walls between them. He had been her husband's closest friend, the one who had stood beside them through every season of life. But after the loss, their paths had split. She had buried herself in survival while he had quietly disappeared into the background. And now, here he was. Michael looked older, but not in a way that dulled him. His hair carried strands of silver. His face marked with lines of time, but his presence was the same. Solid, familiar. The kind of presence that once made her feel safe. Emma's voice trembled. "Michael, what are you doing here?" Before he could answer, Daniel stepped closer. his smile full of quiet pride. "This was the surprise, Mom. I thought it was time." Emma's eyes darted between them, her heart racing. "Time for what?" Daniel's expression softened. "Time for you to see that you don't have to carry everything alone. Time for you to remember that happiness is still possible." Her lips parted, but no words came. She turned back to Michael, who hadn't moved closer, but whose eyes carried something she recognized: longing, regret, and something deeper she dared not name. He gave a small nod, as if to ease her shock. "I didn't know if you'd want to see me," Michael said quietly. "But when Daniel called, I couldn't say no." Emma felt her knees weaken. She clutched the back of a nearby chair, trying to steady herself. This was too much, too sudden. She hadn't prepared her heart for this. Memories rushed forward: the way Michael had laughed with her husband, the way he had always treated her with kindness, the way his eyes lingered a second longer than they should have when no one was watching. She had buried all of it, convinced it was wrong to feel anything at all, and now Daniel had placed it right in front of her. She turned to her son, her voice barely above a whisper. "Daniel, why?" He didn't hesitate. "Because Dad told me once he didn't want you to spend your life alone. He said if you ever had the chance to find joy again, I should remind you to take it. I think this might be that chance." Emma's chest tightened, tears stinging her eyes. She looked back at Michael, whose gaze hadn't left hers. His presence stirred everything she had locked away. The grief, the longing, the hope. The lodge suddenly felt too small, the air too thick. She needed space, air, anything to slow the pounding in her chest. She set her bag down and walked quickly toward the deck outside. The cool air wrapped around her, and the sight of the lake calmed her trembling hands. But even there, she could feel his presence behind her, waiting, patient, and Daniel's hope pressing silently from within the lodge. This wasn't just a trip, it was a turning point. Emma could feel it in her bones. What she chose now would shape more than just the weekend. It could shape the rest of her life. Emma stood on the deck, her eyes locked on the lake as the sun dipped lower, painting the water in shades of gold. The air was cool, sharp against her skin. But it wasn't the wind that made her tremble, it was the man standing, only a few feet away. Michael, a name that carried years of silence, unspoken memories, and a history too complicated to untangle in one breath. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. She could hear the soft creak of the wooden boards beneath his steps, the quiet rhythm of someone who wasn't rushing, someone who was waiting for her to decide if she wanted to hear him out. "Emma," Michael said finally, his voice low and steady, "I didn't mean to overwhelm you. I know this must feel sudden. It feels that way to me too." She turned, her heart pounding. "Sudden, Michael? I haven't seen you in years. And now, out of nowhere, you're here." Her voice cracked, not with anger, but with the weight of old wounds. He nodded slowly, his eyes soft, carrying that same patience she remembered from long ago. "I stayed away because I thought it was what you needed. You had Daniel. You had your own battles to fight. I didn't want to make things harder." Emma gripped the railing, the cold wood grounding her. "And now? Why now?" Michael's expression shifted, pain flickering across his face. "Because your son called me. He told me you've been alone too long. He said you deserved more than quiet evenings and empty rooms. He thought maybe I could remind you of that." The words sank into her, heavy and sharp. She didn't know whether to thank Daniel or cry for the way he had stepped into her private sorrow. She had worked so hard to hide it, to smile through the loneliness, but clearly her son had seen it all along. Emma shook her head, struggling to breathe evenly. "Michael, you are my husband's closest friend. Do you know how complicated this is? How much it hurts even standing here with you?" He stepped closer, not too close, but enough for her to feel the warmth of his presence. "I know. Believe me, I know. But Emma, your husband was my friend. He was also the one who told me years ago that if something ever happened to him, I should look after you. I didn't understand what he meant then. Maybe I was too afraid to. But I understand it now. Her chest tightened, tears threatening to fall. She remembered her husband's laugh, the way he had trusted Michael with everything. She remembered nights when the three of them had sat together, sharing meals and stories, never realizing how short time would be. "You can't just walk back into my life and expect me to know what to do with this," she whispered, her voice breaking. Michael's eyes held hers, steady and full of quiet ache. "I don't expect anything, Emma. I just wanted to see you again, to remind you that you don't have to keep living in the shadows of what you lost." Her throat tightened, her mind spinning with memories. She remembered the way Michael had looked at her at the funeral. A glance that carried more than grief, a glance she had forced herself to forget. She remembered how safe she had always felt around him, how his kindness had filled spaces she hadn't dared to acknowledge. And now, standing here, those feelings rushed back like a tide she couldn't control. The deck door opened behind them, and Daniel stepped out quietly. He didn't interrupt, just leaned against the frame, watching with hopeful eyes. His presence was a reminder this wasn't coincidence. This was carefully planned, its way of giving her a chance she might never have taken herself. Emma turned to him, her voice sharp but full of love. "Daniel, why did you do this? Why bring him here?" Her son didn't flinch. He walked closer, his face calm. "Because you've spent years being strong for everyone else. But Mom, I've seen you. I've seen the way you stare at old photographs, the way you sit in silence like you're waiting for something that never comes. I just wanted you to have a choice. That's all." Emma's tears finally slipped free. She pressed her hand to her mouth, her emotions flooding all at once. Love for her son, grief for her husband, and the strange, undeniable pull she felt toward Michael. Michael's voice was soft, almost a whisper. "Emma, I don't want to erase the past. I could never. Your husband was my brother in every way but blood. I only want to be part of your present, if you let me." The honesty in his words cut through her confusion. There was no demand, no pressure, just truth. A truth that had always lingered between them, unspoken but alive. Emma closed her eyes, trying to steady herself. The sound of the lake lapping against the shore filled the silence. She thought of her husband, his strength, his laughter, his love. She thought of the way he had always wanted her to keep living, not just surviving. When she opened her eyes again, Michael was still there, waiting, his gaze filled with quiet hope. Daniel stood behind him, his expression soft, almost pleading. Emma swallowed hard, her voice trembling as she spoke. "I don't know if I'm ready. I don't know if I'll ever be ready." Michael gave a small nod. "That's okay. I'll wait as long as it takes. I just needed you to know that I'm here." Her heart ached, torn between fear and possibility. She wasn't ready to decide, but she couldn't deny what she felt standing there. The warmth of his presence, the weight of her son's love, the whisper of a life that might still hold joy. The sky deepened into twilight, the lake shimmering with fading light. Emma turned back toward the horizon, tears drying on her cheeks. For the first time in years, her heart didn't feel completely empty. It felt uncertain, fragile, but alive. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But she knew one thing: this trip wasn't just a trip. It was a door. And though she wasn't ready to walk through it yet, she couldn't ignore that it was standing wide open. The weekend moved forward like a tide Emma couldn't stop. At first, she kept her distance, choosing silence over questions, but the retreat had a way of softening her. The calm water, the long paths wrapped in golden leaves, the warm crackle of the lodge fireplace, it all pulled her into a place where her guard began to slip. And everywhere she went, Michael was near, never pushing, never asking for more than she could give. His presence was steady, almost like a shadow of comfort she hadn't realized she'd missed. On Saturday morning, Daniel suggested a walk by the lake. Emma hesitated, but when she stepped onto the trail, Michael was already there. Daniel gave her a quiet smile, then drifted behind them, letting the two walk side by side. For a while, the only sounds were the crunch of leaves and the distant call of birds. Emma found herself glancing at Michael, noticing the way he still carried himself with the same quiet strength. His hair had more silver now, his eyes had more lines. But those lines told stories of endurance, of years lived with meaning. Finally, Michael broke the silence. "You know," he said softly, "your husband used to talk about this place. He always wanted to bring you here. He said you loved the water, that being near it made you feel alive." Emma's breath caught. She had forgotten that conversation, but as Michael spoke, it came back like a whisper from the past. Her husband had promised her a lakeside trip one day, but the promise had vanished when life grew too full and then too short. She blinked quickly, fighting the sting of tears. "He always had plans," she murmured. "We just ran out of time." Michael's voice carried both warmth and regret. "I don't want you to feel like time has run out now. I know I can't replace what you lost. I'd never try. But I can stand beside you in whatever comes next if you'll let me." Emma looked down at the path, her heart racing. His words were gentle, but they pressed against the deepest corners of her loneliness. She didn't answer, not yet. Instead, she focused on the sound of her son's footsteps behind them. Daniel's presence reminded her that this wasn't just her decision. He had brought Michael here for a reason, because he wanted her to see something she had been too afraid to face. Life wasn't over. Later that afternoon, they shared lunch on the deck overlooking the lake. The sun warmed their faces and laughter light. Genuine laughter escaped her lips more than once. Daniel told stories from his childhood, stories Emma had long forgotten. And Michael listened with a smile that carried both memory and admiration. It felt natural, as though years hadn't stretched between them. For the first time in a long while, Emma didn't feel like she was surviving. She felt like she was living. But as the evening came, doubt returned. Sitting by the fire in the lodge, Emma watched the flames flicker and asked herself the question she had been avoiding. Could she really allow herself to move forward? To open her heart again, especially to the man who had been part of her past in such a complicated way? She was afraid of betraying her husband's memory, afraid of stepping into something she might not be strong enough to handle. As though sensing her thoughts, Michael moved closer, his voice calm. "Emma, I don't want you to feel rushed. This weekend isn't about making decisions. It's about reminding you that joy can still find you, that you don't have to keep carrying everything alone." Her eyes filled and she turned toward him, her voice breaking. "What if I can't do it? What if it's too late for me?" Michael shook his head firmly, his gaze steady. "It's never too late. Not for love, not for peace. Your son knows it. I know it. The only person who needs to believe it is you." His words struck her like a chord she hadn't realized was waiting to be played. For so long she had lived with the belief that her story was finished, that her chance for happiness had ended with her husband's last breath. But sitting there, with Michael's steady presence and Daniel's quiet hope filling the room, she realized something important. Her story wasn't finished. It was simply waiting for a new chapter. On the last evening, the sky exploded in colors of pink and gold. Daniel urged them all outside to watch the sunset by the lake. The water glowed, catching every shade of the sky, and the reflection made it feel as if they were standing inside a painting. Emma stood at the edge, the cool breeze brushing her face, her son beside her, Michael only a step away. Michael's voice was low, but it carried clearly in the stillness. "Emma, I need to say this before we leave. I cared for you even back then. I buried it because it wasn't right, because you were his. But I never stopped. And when I lost him too, I thought I had lost the chance forever. Being here with you again, it's shown me that the chance is still here. I don't expect you to answer tonight or tomorrow. I only want you to know that my heart has been yours longer than you realize." Emma's breath trembled, her chest heavy with emotion. Daniel glanced at her, his eyes shining with quiet hope. His hand brushing hers as if to say, "It's okay. Mom, it's your choice." She looked at Michael, at the man who had carried both her past and now offered her a piece of her future. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine what it would feel like not to be alone, not to survive, but to live fully and without fear. Her lips curved into the smallest, most fragile smile. "Michael, I don't know what tomorrow holds, but tonight, standing here, I feel something I thought I'd lost. And maybe maybe that's enough to start. The lake shimmered under the fading light, the air holding the silence of a moment that mattered. Emma felt her son's hand squeeze hers, felt Michael's eyes holding her steady. And for once, she didn't resist the hope swelling in her chest. It wasn't just a family trip. It was the beginning of something new, a story written not out of loss, but out of courage, second chances, and the quiet strength to open her heart again.